see that?
Yeah.
So
John believes that with the eye of faith, he can see a pretty substantial building, possibly even with a courtyard.
John?
And within minutes, the archaeology seems to back up his theory.
Is this the sort of thing that you might have picked up on this brick?
Yeah, I think there should be a cut feature through here.
Yeah, well then that's reflected by this brick and tile, is it?
Yeah.
It sounds like we are on the spot then.
And things are also looking up in the understaffed ditch trench.
We still haven't got to the bottom of them, and hopefully you'll be able to help us with those.
We've now got a virtually limitless supply of extra diggers from a local college, Christ's Hospital. This also just happens to be the school where our 1920s archaeologist Samuel Winbolt taught, and his legacy looms large here. A lot of these sixth formers are actually studying archaeology.
You start from this end, you see this yellow here, you don't want to hit the yellow, so just keep taking this back a bit, like that. There we go.
So in return for some practical experience in trench digging, we're now confident we can get to the bottom of these ditches by the end of day 3. Hopefully. These massive ditches didn't enclose just the Mancio, but a whole complex of buildings that would have served Roman officials and traders as they travelled the country. Horses were the main form of transport, so one of the key facilities here would have been the blacksmiths. And among his many jobs would have been the manufacture of what's believed to be the precursor of the modern horseshoe, the hippo sandal.
Although I've seen pictures of these many times in books, I've actually never seen a real one, so I'm really interested in how it's going to look.
Luckily, I managed to get up to the British Museum last week, and we actually managed to get up close and personal with some, so I could come and make some today.
So how are you going to start making them?
Well, I'm going to take a plate, I've got to forge it down into this nice triangular shape, and then turn a loop on the front. And then the wings on the side, we're going to have to form those, and then weld them on top and bottom. And try and come down on top of it rather than coming back towards it.
This design is based on various archaeological finds, but surprisingly, no one's ever tried the theory out on a real live horse.
Get in there, go on. That's it, that's the one.
So we're using Christ Hospital's fully equipped school forge, yes, school forge, to test how practical this hippo sandal is. Oh, and we will be using a real live horse. This area was once a parade ground used by the military in the 19th century, and it appears that any medieval buildings here were destroyed during the construction work. I have to admit I've been more interested in the medieval story than the later history on this site, but after finding out that one of the walls we've uncovered was part of the governor's mansion, I'm intrigued to know a bit more about it.
This one shows one side of it, so we've got our church there, and this one shows the front. Just before it was knocked down in 1826. Looks rather nice, doesn't it? And it was the scene of some of the most amazing moments. A few years before it was knocked down, in 1814, there was a massive 4-day party here to celebrate the defeat of Napoleon. And we've got a list of the people who were here. We've got the Prince Regent, with the Emperor of Russia, Frederick, King of Prussia, Marshal Blücher, Prince Platov, whoever he may be, and
they all came?
They all came. The Duke of Wellington did turn up 2 days late, but then perhaps he was allowed to.
Hang on, did you just say defeat of Napoleon in 1814?
Yeah, you're thinking of the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, aren't you? There was a bit of a problem because just as they were celebrating, I think he was escaping from Elba, and they had to do it all over again.
We may not have found anything belonging to the Emperor of Russia, but having cleaned up the ring we found yesterday, Helen believes it probably does date to the time the house was being demolished in the 19th century.
You can see much more clearly now what's going on.
I will do if I put my glasses on.
So in these 3 holes, there would have been stones. And then you can see here, there's an S, then there's an A, and then the big one there is an R. And then after that, he's had a go at doing an A or an H. It says Sarah. So I think it really is a bit of sentimental jewellery. It's for a sailor's girl. He's bought it. He's tried to write Sarah. Perhaps it hasn't quite worked. He might have chucked it away.
Well, yeah, maybe the relationship made him chuck it away.
With time running out, We've now stopped digging here in what was Phil's original trench. It's possible that we've turned up evidence of the larder or food storehouse shown on this plan, but it'll take a much longer dig to sort it out. With the people who invited us here starting to crowd around the trenches, all our efforts are now being focused here in Trench 2, where we'd like to be able to prove to them that we've found the medieval hall belonging to the hospital. Right now, Phil's extending this excavation yet again to see if he can find the western end of the building.
Mac?
Yeah?
I reckon I got it.
You think you've got it?
Yeah, I reckon I got it.
At last we've found what we think is another medieval wall, and it's parallel to the wall we've already identified at the other end of the trench. Now it feels like we're getting somewhere.
So it's going to be about that sort of width like that then?
Well, it about that sort of width, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you when I dug it.
Yeah.
It seems this medieval building didn't get updated to become part of the governor's mansion and would have gone out of use when the hospital was closed down by Henry VIII in 1540, along with the country's monasteries and other religious institutions. Normally, a layer of archaeology this crisp and pristine would have every digger on site straining at the leash. At the moment, most of our resources are focused on lifting the skeletons at the top of the hill as we hunt for more clues to the Anglo-Saxon element of this extraordinary multi-period site.
Okay, so this looks as though it's going to come out now.
Oh, wow.
So it's come out.
That's
pretty well.
Fantastic. Look at that. Is fabulous.
Now just look at the shape of that jaw. Let's take that little bit off. What do you think, Rashka?
It's quite gracile, isn't it? It's not robust. And this part of the mandible, it's not, you know, really chunky. Or
We've got no big kind of muscle attachments, have we? So if anything, that's looking
more like a lady.
But as we start to remove the skeletons from Trench 2, it becomes apparent that we haven't just got 2 burials, but the remains of up to 7 different individuals, including children and babies.
I just wanted to show you this. So I heard you talking about the teeth. There, can you see
Oh, wow.
the molar popping through? And so obviously it was a young child. I was wondering kind of how old that would be, at what age that?
Yes, look at that.
You look at that tooth there, it's
been-
very small, so that's, you could almost say that is in its milk teeth still.
Yeah.
Its adult teeth were, you know, coming through
There
there.
they are, there's an adult one there, you see.
Yes, just coming up. I think that makes this as a pretty young.
Yeah.
7?
About 7. Yes.
Lovely job.
And now that the burials have been removed, we can also confirm that Trench 2 contains a kiln, although it seems to be of a different construction to the one in Phil's trench.
I think what you've got actually, Helen, is a stone-lined cut. In other words, it could be the actual chamber of a kiln. Oh. And this is like the stone lining for the cut. That's the kiln interior, and then you would have had the fire bricks or clay lining the inner face of that wall, forming the actual furnace chamber for the kiln.
It's now almost the end of day 2, and it feels like we've got more to investigate than ever. And that doesn't even include the masses of newly uncovered archaeology in the ditch trench.
Oh, crikey, look at that lot.
You see the amount of pot we've got
Yeah.
crammed into the centre there.
So, I mean, this is presumably occupation years.
Oh, yeah, I think it's occupation with knobs on, I suspect. I mean, that much pottery,
Yeah.
and some of it's very fresh, could be a kiln as well. I mean, you know, and settlement. We know it's settlement because you've got bits of lunch.
Oh, yes, you've actually got the cut marks on the bones, so somebody's at least eating down here, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Back on the hill, more evidence from the Anglo-Saxon periods emerging.
Brace yourself for treasure. Ta-da!
Even I, as a Romanist, would recognise that as
Yep.
a significant object. It's
Absolutely.
not
It may not be
Saxon
beautiful.
pinhead.
Yep, Middle Anglo-Saxon, 8th, 9th century. So
Yeah.
it fits in brilliantly with the shatter
Doesn't it?
and with the pottery that seems to be coming out of
Yeah.
the ditch, which is really tremendous. It's really
That's
exciting.
superb.
I mean, I know it's building castles in the air, but an Anglo-Saxon ditch, a Middle Anglo-Saxon ditch round an island,
Yeah.
it's beginning to look like, oh, could be a monastery.
There are now all sorts of theories running around the site that we may have discovered a significant centre of Anglo-Saxon religion.
Oh my goodness, what's that? What is that?
It's another wall. and it's butting against the wall of the kiln. Somebody's built a wall into the kiln.
My goodness.
And that wall was cut by the graves.
Oh gosh, that's an awful lot of strange happenings all at once.
Yep. They've created an apse. They've taken a circular structure and they've created an apsidal thing.
The thing that I immediately think of with an apsidal building is, at what date do they do this? Burials, apses, you know, it's all sounding awfully church-like.
Now, suggesting a bit of reused kiln is possibly part of an early church seems a theory too far to me. And in fact it probably is, but for the archaeologists, this isn't some bizarre leap of faith. We could be on the verge of discovering something really special.
I think this kiln is disused, stable, overgrown before these post holes are being put in. So post-Roman, and apart from Roman finds, the most common find on this site has been Middle Anglo-Saxon. So I would like them to be Middle Anglo-Saxon. And in fact, Ben and I have been hypothetically building religious houses out of them for a while.
Yes. What do you think? Two different periods on one site?
Yeah, well, they're definitely post-Roman, like you say. The finds, the skellies, the ditch. You know, some sort of Middle Saxon community on this hilltop. And the local parallels for that are hermitages.
Is that just like a little hut where a hermit lives?
Yeah, kind of, a little sort of community. The interesting thing is we don't actually know what the sites look like because all the other sites grew into fantastic abbeys. So Crowland, Ely, Thorney, they all start off as hermitages and grow into big abbeys. So we just don't see the early stuff.
Hermits were effectively the first monks. And if this is a Middle Saxon hermitage, we've found something incredibly rare. Because most hermitages now lie under some of Britain's most impressive abbeys and cathedrals.
We know that the way the early church was organised, that's what people did. They went and lived miles from anybody else, on retreat, we'd call it today, wouldn't we? Sort of, you know, in isolation. And this sort of fits that same pattern.
So is it anything more than speculation to say there was a hermitage here?
No, it is speculation, but it fits the archaeological evidence for that period. So, you know, I'm reasonably confident that's what we've got.
If it is a hermitage, how important a site does it make it?
Well, every so often we do a programme and I think what we find, that'll go into the textbooks because it's a good example of this or a better example of that. And I think this is one of those, you know. You've got an enclosure from the geophysics, you've got Saxon pottery, you've got burials, you've got post-hole buildings. That's the sort of thing that's going to get mentioned in any discussion about this period or this topic. So I think it's one of those.
The only problem with the theory is that hermits demand isolation, and our work here has shown that in Roman times this hill was a busy industrial site. But the final work by Henry and Stewart shows that this landscape changed dramatically after the Romans left.
Yes, I mean what happens in the Saxon period is that the island actually acts as a bit of a dam for all the sediment that's being washed down the hill, and it all gets dropped in this area. You get alluvium. The water slows down, drops the material, it starts building up backwards, and it actually covers over the settlement, the area that Kerry was digging over here. That's why you got that high depth of alluvium in that area. But what that does also, it sort of further isolates this island out here. It ceases to become part of the economy. There's no need for a settlement, as it were, out on this remote little island.
Oh, except by certain people.
Yeah, except by, you've got it.
Yes,
it
yes.
becomes an ideal location for a little
Absolutely.
monastic hermitage.
Absolutely.
It's
You're
got the
singing my
isolate-
song,
yeah.
you. Just like the Somerset level stuff I've been looking at,
Is
where
it?
every little island has got some crackpot old chap living on it, you know, as in retreat. or
Sounds
whatever.
ideal for you, doesn't
Sounds
it?
absolutely ideal for me.
So this was once a small, isolated religious community. It's late morning on day one, and we're opening our first trench here. A 10-metre-long slice right across the ditch and bank system of our prehistoric earthwork. We're looking for evidence of how it was constructed, and finds like bits of pottery. Basically anything that might hint at what this earthwork was for and why people went to the trouble of building it here in the first place. Both of which at the moment are a complete mystery. But there could be an important clue down in the valley below. This is where you were looking for some kind of Bronze Age roundhouse, isn't it? How have you got on?
We've got it, Tony. I mean, I can't be absolutely certain that it's Bronze Age, but we've certainly got the roundhouse. Look, we've got this tumble of stones. They spreads round in a big arc coming round here in this quadrant of the roundhouse. I think this is probably where the wall has actually fallen down the slope. So we've got our roundhouse. Crucially, we've got some finds. Look at that lot. That is all worked flint.
Oh, there's a lot of these, isn't there?
There must be at least 10 or 20 pieces there, and we've actually got one here that's been retouched into a tool. Look, somebody's chipped off that flint there and retouched that into a little scraper. And all this worked flint is coming from the floor of the hut.
Great, our first tool. So we think we've got evidence of people living here. We think we know what they did with their dead. But who were they and when were they around? We need dating evidence. Beginning of day 2 here at Knockdhu in Northern Ireland. As you can see, it's been raining all night and the trenches have filled up with water. The 4x4s can't get up here anymore. Look at the state of that trench there. The tractor got stuck in the mud. We've all had to walk up half a mile of this carrying our equipment before we can even start. But it's been all worthwhile, so the archaeologists tell me, because we found this incredible system of prehistoric defensive ditches. Not only that, we've also got a prehistoric roundhouse, complete with evidence of the people who lived in it. Although I keep getting confused, Francis, because I think of this as the whole roundhouse, but in fact, it's only a quarter of it, isn't it?
Yes, you can see the walls going on the outside there, round back behind us, right round there, and then that's the doorway.
What's the significance of this find for you?
Well, what's really exciting about it is this is a proper house. This is a permanent dwelling for people. And we've got the debris they left behind them on the floor in the form of flints.
What do we do with it now?
Well, we've got to define those walls, and then I think we'll extend in this direction to see how it's been set back into the hillside.
What else are we going to do? What are your other targets?
Well, do you remember yesterday, at the end of the day, we discovered this barrow, this cairn on the other side of the hill? Now, I think that is crucially important.
So does that mean there might be a burial in it?
I hope so, Tony. I mean, the radar looked very much like there was one. And of course, that's important because, OK, we got the living, but we've also got the dead. We've got their ancestors. So that adds to the importance of this place.
We're really starting to be able to tell the story of this place, aren't we?
Oh, this place is beginning to hum, yeah.
Except that after last night's torrential rain, it's also turned into a quagmire. It's causing us one or two minor technical problems. Unless we want to excavate in snorkels and flippers, first we're going to have to bail out the trenches. It's 10:45 on day 2, and we're opening a third trench here to excavate the mound with a dip underneath it that we picked up on the radar yesterday. If this is a stone-lined grave, it'll give us a pretty accurate date for this part of the site.
As I understand it, Rexha, if these are post holes, we could be looking at a palisade that's made up of like one large one and then lots of little, almost stake-like post holes in between.
Back in Trench 1, there's been a breakthrough. We found the first evidence that the earthwork was fortified.
This looks pretty convincing. This is a huge one here. You've got one at the top.
Yeah.
And then we've got lots of kind of smaller tentative ones, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, this could be one here.
A bit further down.
This could be one here. And then an interesting one down here, which at the moment, actually, can you see that orange there?
Yeah.
That could be some burned clay. And there's actually charcoal fleck in it. And from past studies on these things, they're often a good indicator for actual post holes.
These post holes could have been used for the sharpened wooden stakes of a palisade built on top of the earthwork to defend whatever was up here. And there's now more evidence for that in Trench 3, because what we thought was a grave for the dead actually turns out to be a place for the living.
What it looks like we have is that looks to be a foundation trench associated with a roundhouse.
Ah, yeah, you can see there is this dark stripe across there, and they're lovely sort of packing stones really rammed in there to make a good foundation.
Yeah. So the roundhouse sort of goes upslope here, and I believe there are another two potential roundhouses just a bit further up.
But the fact is that if you open up this little area and you inadvertently stumble upon a roundhouse, you don't know it's here. I mean, if we don't know that this one's here, how many more roundhouses were there? The whole hillside could be smothered in roundhouses.
We've now confirmed not one, but two roundhouses that Phil believes could be part of a much bigger settlement. So we're now convinced this earthwork was built to protect the people living on the promontory behind it. And we think they may have been rather special, because a fort like this was a clear display of their power and wealth to the outside world. And it was a world that Knockdhu was surprisingly close to, because the prehistoric people living here didn't confine themselves to the Antrim coast. They also had links with communities from across the Irish Sea, shown by these intriguing tools from local museums.
There's plenty of evidence that this high-quality Antrim flint was actually travelling across the sea to Scotland.
How do we know that?
Ah, well, there's things like this. Fantastic hoard that was found in 1990 by a schoolboy, and it's got 5 ready-to-use flint axe heads.
And where were they found?
They're found at Campbelltown here, you see, just
In
across...
Scotland?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are these ones from?
Well, now that's another part of the story. So it wasn't just stuff going from Ireland to Britain. You get stuff coming back from Britain to Ireland. So these two are from Great Langdale in the Lake District. Again, it's a site where they were knocking out tens of thousands of these things.
So these ones here,
yeah,
these started out in the Lake District and they were found here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's, nearly 100 have been found in Ireland now.
If trading was going on, do you think there'd also have been what you might call cultural exchanges, ideas crossing and people crossing?
Absolutely, yeah, they were intermarrying, they were related to each other. We know this because they were using the same kind of pottery, they were sharing designs, and also the tombs that they were building, these big megalithic tombs, they were exactly the same on either side of the channel.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when you climb to the top of that hill, you imagine that that prehistoric community was really isolated, but you're saying that it's actually got connections with places hundreds of miles away.
Absolutely, yeah.
Back on site, our hamlet has become a village, but Stuart's got a puzzle. He thinks he's now found a staggering 14 roundhouses, but they're not all the same.
You see, they're all separated, they're kind of detached.
So this might have a different function?
Well, I still think it's probably a house, but it may even be a different chronological date to that group over there. Yeah. And this one, as well as the big bank round it, it's also got a raised interior, which makes this one very different to all the others. So it'd be worth putting in a trench in here just to see what this one is.
And provided they don't get lost in the fog, we might find someone to dig it, because this is turning into a battle with the elements. The road leading up here is now a sea of mud, and unfortunately our tractor can't swim. There's only one thing for it: we'll have to excavate it. It's mid-afternoon, day 2. It's getting absolutely ridiculous. I left the tent, which I think is over there, about 7 minutes ago, looking for Phil's trench. I can't find it. I've passed 2 groups of people who were also looking for trenches, which they hadn't been able to find either. I've started shouting for him, but the problem is he's actually a bit deaf, so everyone else keeps answering, and I go blundering off in the wrong direction. I'll find him sometime, I suppose. While we stumble around on the promontory, down in the incident room, Henry's got a major find. He thinks he's found the entrance onto the whole site, cutting through the earthwork at the furthest end.
You can see the actual entrance coming through, you can see the outer bank breaking that and coming up into the inner bank. So playing with the geophysics on that. So that's magnetic data. Perhaps more impressively, you can just see the break in it with the big blue line.
If this was the entrance, then digging here could be key to understanding the site.
We have actually started to really get our head around what's going on in here. We do have the back wall coming round there. It is swinging round here. We've got a really well-preserved roundhouse, about 9 metres in diameter.
What do you think that big post hole might be for?
Well, maybe to support something in the roof, but equally, it could be something related to a hearth here. There was the traces of charcoal in the centre here, which is where you'd expect the hearth to be. And of course, we do have at the back here what looks like possibly a gully. So you can imagine that there's this water cascading down the hill. And this ditch is here to deflect the water around the roundhouse.
Well, I don't know about Francis's theory. If I lived here, I'd never leave the house. With drainage ditches to keep it dry and proper stone foundations for the walls, this house was built to last. Although the very fact that people were living up here at all shows how determined they must have been. And having confirmed this roundhouse, now Francis wants to find the allotment next door. So he's extending Trench 2 here. For me, the problem with all this fog today is that I've got no clear picture of the site. I've just been blundering around, stumbling across archaeologists in trenches who are either very depressed or very excited. But what is this place for? How does it work?
Well, for me, the fog's lifted, Tony, because I could never understand why they put all the effort into these huge defences when they were seeming to defend nothing over there.
Sure.
Well, what now is apparent is that that was a major settlement, somewhere very important and somewhere to be proud of. Now, the way into settlements is always the most important part. So that's why I've taken you here. Look, down there.
You think that this is actually the entrance into the whole settlement?
I'm convinced of it, Tony, and I'm very excited because at the bottom there's paving, and that's potentially prehistoric.
Well, maybe, but the burial that was promised yesterday turned out to be a roundhouse. Still, I suppose we'd better give Francis the benefit of the doubt. So at 10:30 on our final day, we're opening a 5th trench here. Back at the earthwork, careful scraping has paid dividends. Ian's discovered that layers of soil were piled up on top of each other, perhaps over centuries, to form one of the banks.
What you seem to have is literally a dump of material on top of this, which is an old ground surface. So this isn't a rampart as such. This is where they've been cleaning the ditch out and they've thrown the material outside to make this bank.
Right, and then to make the purpose of a counterscarp bank is to make even more of an obstacle of the ditch behind it.
Yeah, make the ditch deeper by raising the banks beside it.
Yeah, OK. So, I mean, actually, this is rather good because it does give us evidence that they were strengthening the defences.
Or they were maintaining them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just a one-off event, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. They're coming back several times, year after year, to build this bank up, clean out the ditch, maintain it.
So it's not just a simple one-off event.
No.
No, that's smashing.
We're convinced the earthwork was being strengthened year after year to defend the people living in the village behind it. But who were they? And what were they defending themselves against? Big questions for the last day.
Oh, I've still got some odd bits of flint here.
Back at the roundhouse in Trench 3, we've had another small breakthrough.
God, that's enormous. Just ease that out. Oh, wow.
Oh, look at that.
Even I would recognise that. Isn't that gorgeous?
Is that, and that's actually a touched-up edge around there, isn't it? That's handmade.
So that's going to be a scraper. That is the best piece we've had, and that is a real tool.
Yeah.
That's great, but we're still desperate for a date, something a solitary scraper can't give us. We need results over at the entranceway in Trench 4.
This would have been the sort of ceremonial centre of the site. This was the only major entrance into it. And you came from that direction, and then these earthworks focus you around this corner. Everything is designed to focus people around here and into the entranceway.
Tracy, that scatter of stones along there, do you reckon that actually is some kind of roadway?
I don't think there can be any doubt about it now, Tony. It's really nice. You've got these large stones here. They're running along the edge. They seem to form curb line to the edge of this road. And in areas where it's undulating, they've put these smaller stones in. Basically, they formed a really nice, hard, flat platform for a road surface to come through.
Couldn't this just be 17th century or whatever?
No. The only thing we've got from the surface of this so far has been flint flakes, worked flint. I think we've got to be looking at an early date and could well be Bronze Age.
Fantastic. Finally, we're getting close to dating our site, with some time in the Bronze Age, roughly 4,000 years ago, looking most likely. And what an impressive site this entrance must have been. Probably with a guardhouse controlling access to the village beyond.
Now, the thing is, Tony, you'd have walked on this roadway. We don't know how far it extends. And then if you're heading towards the houses over here, you come into the interior, right? Now, if you look up on the left up here, on the skyline, there are some lumps and bumps. Now, I think they could well turn out to be cairns where the ancestors were buried overlooking the houses and overlooking the gateway.
So you come in through this spectacular entrance with that amazing view behind you. You come up here, the first thing that you see is the ancestors, and beyond it, you've got a view out to the sea.
You've got it.
The sea, perhaps the single biggest clue to what happened on this hill, has been staring us in the face all the time. We know that people in Antrim were exchanging stone tools with communities on the other side. We found plenty of worked flints in our roundhouses, probably from the mine at the foot of the hill. So could trade across the sea explain who these people were and why they were here?
In the Bronze Age, don't forget that people had already been navigating these waters for thousands of years, and they would have had those skills passed on from father to son.
How would they actually physically know where they were going across these waters?
This isn't rocket science, it's coastal navigation, and it's so fortunate in this area where Scotland is only 15 miles away from Northern Ireland. Most days you can see one headland from another.
And look what they've done, this one here. That is abysmal. Bang, bang, and oh, that'll do. But at the end of the day, you could live with this. And I mean, there they are. They are in the Bronze Age, but they are so totally reliant on flint still.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, there's plenty of it around, that's the thing.
Basically, the quality of flint working declined as flint was replaced by metal. These specimens from across our site are so shabby, we can finally be certain that our roundhouses and the people living in them are Bronze Age. And so is the earthwork, which radiocarbon dating showed was built during the Middle Bronze Age, roughly 4,000 years ago.
If you come up this way, you see you actually start rising on the cliff. Well, the first thing you're seeing are these cliffs themselves. They're hugely dramatic.
Henry's really on form. He's made a further discovery. He's found the pathway that prehistoric people would have followed to reach our site.
As you rise up a bit further, you come around on the edge of the cliffs, following this sort of cliff top path, you come to see our site in profile. Now, at that point, the site is dramatic. And then as you keep on going round, that's where the entrance to the site is, right on that edge. That route gives you a very sort of dramatic, almost processional route to the site.
It's 5 o'clock and our 3-day battle against the elements is over. At times, we've scarcely been able to find our way in all the rain and fog, but considering what we've found, it's been worth it. Because what we do know is that a major Bronze Age community lived up here that until now no one knew it even existed. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.